Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Zach on Film. Joining us, the master, Steven Schleicher.
Hello.
Hey, and all the way over there is Matthew.
Wait a minute.
Hey, you're all the way over there.
He gets the master and a full name, and I get, hey, and also Matthew? No.
Yeah.
Start over.
Nope, we're going. This week we've moved on from Savage Steve Holland to another iconic director of American cinema, Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
With I believe this would be his second film.
I believe so.
Of Dazed and Confused.
What do you remember? Do you have any memories of the last day of school before summer school started? I was trying to think about that earlier. The only thing I remember, two instances. One time I was like, this must have been sophomore year.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you know what? I'll just start early and start cleaning out my locker early. So like over the course of a week, I was like throwing trash out, throwing things away, getting books all ready to be turned in. And so that way on the day that it was time to check out and everybody was supposed to clean out their lockers, I was like ready to go. Mm-hmm. And my our class sponsor was being a dick.
Yeah.
And he waited until he checked out everyone else before he got to me.
So lame.
Because he knew that I had been smart and was trying to get stuff done early.
Why would you punish a student like that?
Because, as I said, the only other thing I remember is we used to do like water balloon and water gun fights where we would drive around and try to soak each other in cars and whatnot.
Oh, after school.
After school.
Okay.
On that last day.
Yeah. I feel like it's pretty common now for schools to have like a water fun play day in the last day.
Well, certainly in grade school level.
Yeah, grade school. I guess not in high school.
Yeah. Matthew, do you
You'll
remember
figure it out when
anything?
you get to high school. No, I really don't. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Again, it was the 80s. I mean, the 80s were weird anyway. I don't remember there being anything special about it, but it may just be my general sense of, hey, can I get away from all these jackwagons and get back to reading comics? So,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know that we did anything like weird or special or particularly unusual.
Yeah, some of our friends. It wasn't always the last day. Sometimes when we would clean out our lockers, we wouldn't just throw them away. We'd take them out into a fire pit and burn everything.
All your stuff?
Yeah, just like all the papers and stuff in our lockers.
Yeah.
The last day of our senior year, you only had to do a half day as a senior because you had to practice graduation. But then the cooks, we got a very special steak lunch from the cooks for our last senior day.
Steak?
No, real steak, man.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty legit.
For the kids in Texas, though, in this movie, things are a little bit different for them. The freshmen, or the middle schoolers who will be freshmen,
get tortured.
Yeah,
on
wonderful.
both the male and the female side. So the guys get chased by Ben Affleck and spanked.
Yeah,
with a paddle.
And then the girls have to do all sorts of get doused in all sorts of gross stuff, and then get run through the car wash.
Yeah,
by Parker Posey.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really interesting because leading up to the would-be senior guys, initiating the new crop of freshmen coming into their high school, you see one of them like just drilling holes into a paddle, and then they all just scatter right at the end, chasing down all these junior high kids so they can just give them a nice welcome into high school where your life is not going to be as fun as your butt's about ready to be.
What's the point of this movie?
What's the point of Dazed and Confused?
What's this movie about?
I've been thinking about that a lot because I watched it just this weekend, and I don't know if it's just like everything going on in America right now and who we have to watch all the time and just general this stuff, but I had like a great sadness at the end of this movie.
Why is that?
Of just having to watch most of these characters like pretend there's someone else and like try to find out who they are and are always just pretending this whole time and trying to put up a front. And we see one character kind of crack. I was going to remember his name, but no, I don't. So I'm going to, Adam Goldberg's character, Mike, who is wearing like he got the big poofy black hair his character kind of stamps at the end. And I think he's really obvious. And kind of when that happens, it made me rethink a lot of the characters and what their motivations were. And it just seemed to me that like a lot of kids were really not knowing who they wanted to be. And it was kind of kind of put me in a bummer mood at the end of this movie, which I don't think was what this movie was supposed to do.
And maybe it was. I mean, I don't think you're too far off. I mean, I think when you think about what high school is, and especially in the 70s when, it's not as politically correct maybe as it is today, where teachers look the other way when it's time for the seniors to kick your ass on the first or last day of school.
Yeah.
And you kind of had to pretend to be somebody different. You had to pretend that you fit in with the group, or else you were ostracized. And we kind of saw some of those themes in The Breakfast Club.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little bit more in your face here because you have an even greater diverse cast of cliques and people. You get, the nerds, the jocks, the dweebs, all
the
all
Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club was about uniting. It was about commonalities. This is about, really thematically, this is about imaginary lines of demarcation where your first day as a freshman, you earn your stripes by being beaten by the outgoing seniors who are going to go off and go to college or do whatever they do, or hang around the bowling alley talking like this. But all of this, you talk about the people pretending to be something they're not. It's all about those expectations, those you belong to this group now, and this is how this group has to act. This is not about the commonalities so much as how, even though people have commonalities, they will go out of their way to belong to whatever group they want to belong to, or to try and seem like they should belong. So in a way, this is like sort of an inverse version of that Breakfast Club thing where rather than celebrate that we all came together and we think you're a fool for making us write an essay, this is, how we, who are a bunch of individual kids, are going to be smashed into the appropriate boxes and grow up and be adults with dead souls. Mm-hmm. That was depressing. Just describing that was depressing. I'm going to go take a nap.
Yeah, there are some really nice things where you see like Mitch kind of navigate these waters, and it was really enjoyable to see because I think the great thing about the initiation that the incoming seniors, male and female, is that they kind of lay it on really hard on these incoming freshmen.
Right.
But there is this sense of
one of us.
Yeah, one of us. And we're going to we're do this one little thing, which not cool, in general, but that they were going to take care of them. And Mitch becomes their friends essentially by the end of the movie.
The hazing is the big focus of the feature, right? And then some people not taking it well, other people just okay with it, and other people avoiding it completely. What is the point of hazing?
Are you asking me? Or is that
rhetorical? I'm asking you.
I mean, there's the sense of you go through this and you get to be in our thing. It's what we all do, right?
Right.
A shared experience, a shared negative experience most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
To show that you they call it in the wrestling business, they call it paying your dues. Mm-hmm. And if you show up and you're the new guy, sometimes you have to go through all sorts of hoops. It's just like any group. You come in, you can't immediately establish yourself as I'm a person who does this, because that's not the way things is done. Basically, you by participating in that ritual, whatever that would be, whether it be the beating or the waterboarding or whatever they do at your school, you go through that and you are basically saying, I am willing to be a part of the group and follow those group mores and rules, even if it means me getting beaten by Ben Affleck, who failed high school for 17 years. So basically, you are giving up a little something to be a part of that larger group. And once again, I'm depressed.
Right. It's that initiation. It's that welcome thing. You've made it through. Now you're part of our group. And unfortunately, what a lot of these characters discover, some of them have taken them 4 years of high school to figure it out. In the case of, as you said, Adam Goldberg and who's the kid that's always high all the time? That's not
Slate.
Yeah, that's not. Gosh, now I can't think of his name.
Rory Cochrane is his name.
Yeah.
But I can't remember his character's name.
Ron Slater, yeah.
Slater, yeah.
The thing is, it takes them their entire school of, look, I'm doing these things because I have to do them. What I really want to do is something else, whether it be get high or talk about the conspiracy theories or whatever it may be. And some of the people, like Ben Affleck, realize that that's his peak moment, right? I mean, he's got such a small role in this film. But that's the peak moment. He'll never be able to relive any of that stuff again because it's over for him. And so for 4 years, it's been building up to this big point where he gets to be the big guy and bring the beat down onto the little kids, like what happened probably to him when he was a freshman. Mm-hmm. The stoners are doing their stoner thing, just trying to get through without failing. Some people are trying to hook up that they've probably been trying to hook up with all year. The freshmen now are told, hey, you will have this to look forward to when you are seniors. And I think what they all discover is being part of this group, going through this initiation isn't all what it's cracked up to be. Look at the results. Look at Matthew McConaughey's character, who probably like Ben Affleck's character peaked as a senior in high school, and he can't get out of that mentality of let's go drink, let's go cruise for high school girls, let's go do these things. And so, yeah, when he says, I keep getting older, but they're staying the same age, he's locked into that mentality. Mm-hmm. And from the young kid's perspective, what's his name? Jason? Mitch. Yeah. From Mitch.
Or Pink.
Well, let's see.
Pink is the football player that was going to be the quarterback.
No, I'm talking about the young kid, the baseball player.
Mitch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we look at Mitch and we see him just kind of figuring it out, he sees pretty early on that, man, nothing changes. Everybody's still messed up, even if you're part of this group. And so for this initiation thing, this hazing that's going on, for him, it's an empty night. Even though he finds acceptance with people, he didn't have to be hazed for that. He's just going to find these groups of people that he would gravitate to naturally over the course of his school year. So,
but I think Mitch had like the biggest, and maybe Pink, where he was kind of already against the coaches from the beginning, and then it was really his story arc was more about deciding who friends he was going to hang out with. Mm-hmm. You look at Mitch, and he was this really scared kid at the beginning, and then he kind of just accepted what was going to happen to him. And then, he really came into his own, I thought, when after he went and bought the beer, and he's like, oh, wait, let's get Batman, let's pour some paint on him or whatever. I think at that moment, he realized, we don't have to just take this and roll over. Like, if we're all going to be in the same school and you're just going to be a jackass to everyone, then we're going to get you and you're going to look like a fool. And we're not going to hurt you, essentially, but we're going to hurt the thing that you care about, which is like your ego. And that compelled him through the rest of the movie.
So everybody knows that they're going to experience change.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Forced change or change is going on.
I don't know, but I think the thing about high school and some of the characters in this movie, like Pink's football friends are, they see that change is possible, but they're resistant to it because they've been thrown along this path. Like, we've been working this for our whole lives. We're going to win the championship, even though they don't even realize that their friend doesn't even have that same goal. They're just trying to pull him along the same way, and he's making the choice to change, kind of his path. And they're like, well, we're just going to be on the same thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting because this movie came out, if I remember correctly, that's 93.
93.
I think, what's the high school TV show?
Saved by the Bell?
No.
Freaks and Geeks?
Freaks and Geeks.
This is late 90s.
Yeah, that's late 90s. It kind of follows some of the same character arcs, but expanded out much bigger than what we're able to get in this.
Yeah, there's even that weird... I haven't seen all of Freaks and Geeks.
Oh, you should.
On one season.
It's really good.
But they have like that same age. Like there's like the really young high school kids and some of the older ones.
So why... Go ahead, Matthew.
There's only like 12 issues of Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
So why then does this need to take place in 1976?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with, we talked a lot about we're looking at those 69 movies as this kind of turning point in America, and I think we're looking at 76. Some of those things are still coming up because you still have a lot of the same political situations, and then you're looking at America being, celebrating its bicentennial, which brings up a lot of these American ideals, and throwing in the face of this counterculture type high school kids that aren't going to listen to their coaches because they're not going to sign some, statement and stuff. Yeah.
A lot of it too is also based on Linkletter's
I'm sure.
high school years, because that's when he would be around in high school in that time. But he would have been 16 in 76, so he would have been in the middle range. And this is really kind of focusing on, here's the young blood coming in, the old blood going out. And how is this transition? It's not very good. And some of them are still reeling from everything that's going on in the nation, and still trying to cope with, probably more than likely their parents were the hippie generation, maybe not in Texas, but a lot of them may be a lot more free-minded than others, and now their parents are all straight-laced because they had to grow up and become parents and do these things, and so they're trying to come to grips with that. They're also trying to come to grips with changing society. What does it mean to be a kid anymore? Some of these kids. When did Vietnam wrap up?
75-ish.
Yeah, so we're right after that. So some of these kids, like Ben Affleck's character, who hung around for an extra year in high school, probably could have been drafted in the very final days of Vietnam. So, there's that kind of weirdness that kind of is lurking in the background of this very quote-unquote fun, happy, silly movie of kids getting high on a Friday night.
Well, and your Rod Serling principle applies. Serling would take really heavy duty stuff, and Gene Roddenberry as well, and cloak it in science fiction or horror. You can do the same thing, and we saw it in the 70s with Happy Days flashing back to the 50s. We see it with almost contemporary to this movie, That 70s Show, flashing back to the 70s. You cloak it as a period piece, but the points that you're making are not points so much about 1976 as using the trappings of 76 to hide your commentary about the world of 1993. And it's very successful. It's something we see over and over and over, and sometimes it works really well, and sometimes you get That 80s Show, which didn't necessarily work so well. But if you look, there is a grand tradition of movies and television shows set about 20 years ago, partly because it can let someone like a Richard Linklater, you have your touchstones culturally, and you can make this into something that feels, first of all, you don't have to argue with that. This doesn't feel modern enough, but it also gives you a chance to say, well, maybe when we talk about the uncertainty of a kid in 1976, getting past what's going on in Vietnam, you can use that to talk about a kid in 1993 getting past the anxiety of what might be happening in the Persian Gulf. So,
do you also think that this film might serve as kind of a bridging tool between kids of 1993 and the parents who were kids in the 70s?
I can say that that's definitely part of it. That's something that, in the best case scenario, you can look at and say, well, heck, if this is what kids were like when my parents were kids, then my parents were just like me when I was a teenager, which, I use that all the time. My kid is highly aware of the pop culture of 1984, 1985 when I was her age, mostly because that's kind of my touchstone for the world in a lot of ways. But she's aware of that, and she's like, was it just like this when you were a kid? And I'm like, well, I was fatter than you, but yeah, it was. So I think that that's definitely, if it's not an intent on a conscious level, at least on some level, I think it's an intent by the filmmaker.
Do you ever feel like there's too many character plots running through this? Because we have a lot of characters in there that are kind of whining around each other through, like space and time, and they're not always very important, but there's a couple characters whose stories are more prominent than some of the other smaller bit characters.
Oh yeah, definitely.
This is in that, oh God, what was that Lucas film? American Graffiti. This is in that American Graffiti vein where you'll see, a lot of interconnected stories. And sometimes it works. I do think that there's a lot. I don't know that there's too much in this movie, but I also don't think that the creators handle them as well as the interlacing plots of like American Graffiti or The Hollywood Knights, which terrible movie, but it has kind of that similar 18,000 people going and bouncing around and one weird night in Hollywood. So,
but
I don't know about too many, but definitely more than I think they can handle.
This is touted as a coming of age comedy film, right? but it is very much different from Hollywood Nights, and it is really a lot different than, like Porky's, right?
I don't know. There are a lot of parallels in here to what happens in the first Porky's movie.
I don't know. This seems like much more, whereas Porky's and Hollywood Nights are more going for, we need belly laughs and we need gross out humor and we need, double entendre jokes about people's names.
Right.
This one is more like, man, life sucks.
Yeah, there are very
This is an existential kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very existential. Very few big, outrageous laughs. I mean, I watched this by myself, and I'm still a pretty generous laugher when I watch things alone. But this was more of a kind of laughing movie for me than anything we've watched kind of recently. This was not a gut-busting laugh, but a lot of interesting character play on screen instead of, a joke a minute.
This is postmodern Hollywood Nights, or kind of a deconstructed American Graffiti in a way, because I've said it 3 times, and I'll probably say it again before we're done. When you talk about parts of this movie, it's very melancholy, very, kind of a sadness that settles on you when you think about, even that moment where they dump the paint on Ben Affleck's head. I can't call him Batman. But Aubrey from Mallrats gets the paint dumped on his head. And that's a big, meatballs, yay moment. That's a cute and fuzzy bunnies getting their comeuppance. But you feel bad for O'Banion when he flips out and leaves. It gets too real almost. And it kind of undermines that movie, that teenage movie win, for lack of a better word, that what should be a big dramatic moment of, yay, our heroes triumphed over the evil jerk face. But then you're like, but look how upset O'Banion is. And look at this kid's life.
But he is upset because he's been waiting his whole high school career to get to the moment where he gets to haze these kids. And now these kids are hazing him. And it really has shattered his
everything.
world of what you're supposed to do after high school, or what you're supposed to do as a senior.
Right. And
they ruined everything.
And that's also the great thing, I think, about high school movies that are done well, are they can hit on character types that you knew in high school. And so when they dump that stuff on his head, and you're like, oh, then that's like the last time we ever see those freshmen. Like, they're gone. They get that moment of triumph, and they're like, well, we're out of here. We're not ruining this night. But he flips out so much. Like, that guy was like, he got what was coming for him, and he just lost his mind, and then drives over the grass with his, like everyone saw some dude flip out in high school and then drive over the grass in some car. And that's a thing. That's the thing that the high schoolers do. That they drive over grass when they get mad. It's weird.
They cut donuts in your yard.
Yeah. And so I think that is the problem with this movie being really funny, is that it almost gets those types of characters too spot on, where it's like, oh, it's not even funny, because like watching that guy freak out is just like, especially now after he put some time after high school, it's like, it's just sad. Right. Just watching him like his world crumble because some freshman like punked him.
He got to the point where he should have been the man on top, and he wasn't. And to some degree, we joke about this, and I say this all the time, that everything you know is wrong. Everything he had been promised wasn't true. And it's that moment where you're just like, oh God, that sucks. I totally know that feeling. And then, you laugh, but then there's also a sense, an underlying it of, too real, Richard Linklater, too real. It hurt my feelings. It did.
Did you ever get the feeling that this was not taking place in 76?
I don't know.
A lot of times when I watch this,
I have a hard time placing 76.
A lot of times when I watch this, I'm like, wow, this does not feel like 76 for some reason.
What does that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's the look of the film, if it's the artistic direction of the film, if it is the actors, if it's the clothing. There's just something that feels off about 76 clothing in this movie.
And
it feels like when I watch it, a lot of times when I watch it, it feels like, and again, this is a movie done on the cheap, but it feels like I'm watching a movie done in the 90s.
Yeah, when you mention that, especially the acting, it's like, oh yeah, that feels... the acting feels weird 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's definitely understandable. You kind of have, in some ways, when you run into things like this, there are times where, for instance, it'll be like, it's Christmas in New York and Spider-Man's floating around. It almost feels like what they call a topical reference. It's to give you that framework of this is why some things feel like they do.
Mm-hmm.
But in some ways, having that, that 90s aspect, and I do agree with you guys, it's there. It feels less like a 70s movie than a 90s movie wearing a 70s hat. I think that to some degree, it does underline that message that people are alike all over, that, your parents, man, your parents did the same things you did, man. And someday John Cusack is going to be like 60, man, and he's still going to be this eternal teenager, even though he's not in this movie. He was in the last two. Shut up. Okay. So, yeah, I can see it, but I don't know that it damages the movie, or at least it doesn't damage the movie as much as the almost complete lack of structure damages the movie experience for me.
Do you not like, because this is another thing when you compare this to Better Off Dead compared to One Crazy Summer, is that Dazed and Confused is a series of vignettes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And not really a through story, because let's go see what these kids are doing. Let's tell their funny bit about trying to get the keg delivered. And then let's go and tell this funny story of the kids who are trying to get back on the Ben Affleck character. And now let's go follow the crazy old guy who's hitting on high school girls. And how creepy is that? Let's follow his antics.
I don't not love this, but as with, when we talked about One Crazy Summer, when we talked about Better Off Dead, I fell on the other side of a sort of kind of competing movie. And again, it was a Cameron Crowe flick where I say, what's better, One Crazy Summer or Better Off Dead? I say anything. For me, the same year or like earlier the same year, Singles came out. And Cameron Crowe's Singles, which is a very similar movie. And Singles has, no, you're thinking of Reality Bites, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Singles was Campbell Scott and the girl who looks just like Julia Roberts and Bridget Fonda. And they were, out of high school. They were like early college age kids. But it was something that was marketed to that same, because I was the target. You and I were the target audience for this movie and for that movie in 1993. We were 22. This is the movie we were supposed to see. I love Singles so much that it kind of colors Dazed and Confused as me remembering it as the one I didn't like as much. So it's not that I don't like it. It's just not the one that I loved that year, if that makes sense.
I was, pretty fine with the structure. I never felt like it was kind of jumping back and forth too much for me. I don't know if they just paced out the different segments right for me, or if they were just throwing the characters in there at the right moment where that story had a compelling beat that kind of jumped off of the last one, and so we had this nice swish where we weren't like bouncing crazy around. That made it feel really jostled looking at each of the different characters, but never really had the sense that they weren't going on a path forward through the night for the characters. It never felt to me like any character story was completely stalling out, that they were all moving forward and kind of figuring out themselves in this one night. So, I mean, for me, from that standpoint, I thought they did fine, because there was, in the main characters that we look at, or at least the ones that I can remember, I felt like there was enough development, or once they peaked, like they were gone, like the kids and Ben Affleck and some of the football players, like they were gone. Until we get to the very end, where you get Pink's character and, and he kind of comes full circle and makes his decision on what he's going to do with the rest of his life and moving, or at least for the next year. which was his big, conflict throughout the film.
He's not going to sign the pledge. He's going to go see Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Detroit Rock City! That's not Aerosmith. You know what I'm saying.
Have you ever plotted out a film? Have you ever watched a film and said, okay, this scene features these characters and what's going on in this scene, and it lasts 10 minutes, and then...
No.
You should try that sometime, just to see how a film is structured and put together.
Just to see how much...
Yeah, you can do it to see how much screen time is there. You can see it for how a scene is built up. I forget what the YouTube channel, they do this a lot, where they will go in and analyze a sequence. Mm-hmm. And they went in and they analyzed this movie that's like, what was the drug movie that came out last year with the female drug enforcement officer? But they break down the scene, and they're like... Sicario, yeah. And they break down the scene, and they're like, okay, here's how this happens. Here's how they draw out tension. Mm-hmm. And it's like, look how the director repeats this 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. And they break it down for you into that minute detail. But in this case, with Dazed and Confused, you could do it fairly easily just with a regular watch and just say, hey, here's scene 1. Here's what's happening. Here's all the characters. It lasts 10 minutes. Then what happens next? Who are the characters there, and how involved are they in this? And then you'll start seeing the through line of both Mitch and Pink as they go through, and you'll see all these other characters pop in and pop out for sometimes long periods of time that you may not realize because of the way the story is structured. It's an interesting exercise. I've done it a couple of times with some Steven Spielberg films, and it's always amazing to just see how it's timed out and what shots were used and how long they were used and those kinds of things.
Yeah, it'd definitely be interesting with this because there are enough characters and plot lines that you're right. You're probably Pink and Mitch aren't on the screen as much as I think they are, with a few of the other characters taking up time. Yes, that would be interesting, especially for this one. And easily done because, unlike Better Off Dead, Dazed and Confused is on Netflix.
Yeah, this one's been almost been on Netflix perpetually since, I don't know, 10 years maybe?
Sure.
Since Netflix
I can imagine.
Around. I mean,
Richard Linklater, he slips them a couple bucks every week or so.
I'm sure. Yeah, because I remember last time I watched it was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
on Netflix.
On the Netflix.
So, yeah.
Is that a release thing? Is that like the company?
Yeah.
Who put this thing out?
Oh, I don't know who put this.
Who put this movie out? Gramercy Pictures.
I wonder if Gramercy has like some sort of insight.
They may have just had a long extended use rights of this film. I mean, the movie didn't do well in the box office. It only made like $8 million. I mean, it made less than $8 million on a budget of $8 million or $6 million. So
really?
Barely.
This was that big of a budget?
Yeah, it's a super low budget considering everybody that you see in here.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of characters. None of them are very big, though. Like this is
if you're looking at
Affleck's like second film,
you've got Jason London, Joey Lauren Adams, Mila Jovovich, Rory Cochrane, Adam Goldberg, Sasha Jensen, Marissa Ribisi.
But aren't there a lot of these like first films for these people?
Some of them are.
Yeah,
really. Yeah.
But you think then where did they go from there? It's holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird.
Also Jason London.
It was weird seeing Adam Goldberg in this because I've only seen him in I think like 1 or 2 other films, like season like Saving Private Ryan, right? Mm-hmm. And in this now, but the weird thing is the reason I really know who he is because when Vine became really big at the beginning, he was doing a lot of really weird, interesting stuff on Vine, and like that's how I know Adam Goldberg is from his Vine account.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who's been around and been in everything. Mm-hmm. And part of my problem is I don't recognize Adam Goldberg without a beard.
Oh, yeah.
So you'll see him in stuff and you'll be like, is that okay? But yeah, he was even in like several episodes of Friends, which is probably the year you were born or something.
A couple after. Yeah, I actually didn't know. I mean, everyone makes such a big deal of Matthew McConaughey in this film. Right. I had no idea Ben Affleck was in this.
Right, because Ben Affleck's character is in there for...
for
the whole movie,
screen time, like
it's like 102 minutes long, and he's in there for maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah,
he's not in there very long.
Which it just like was weird to me. I was like, well, that's a pretty big actor. Or at least someone would probably say something. But seeing him,
this would be before. Dogma. That'd be before Chasing Amy. This is before Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
So this is like
this is the character that Affleck played until Kevin Smith gave him the shot.
Right.
In Chasing Amy. This is the jerk that Ben Affleck played in like his first 12 movies or something.
No.
It was really weird because I saw like Marissa Ribisi is in this, who's also in Chasing Amy.
Right.
Which is what I know her from. And then Ben Affleck's in this. And I was like, oh, he's in Chasing Amy. And well, then I know Linklater is such a big influence on Smith. I'm like, oh, so he's just poaching the peeps.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Joey Lauren Adams is in this, and she was Amy.
She was in Chasing Amy.
Who is?
She's Alyssa. He's the one girl that...
She's gay and doesn't want to have
No, I know. Who's she in this one?
She's Simone. At the end, when they're driving off to get their tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so they were in the same car together. That's weird.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's another thing that if you look at what Smith did, he cast them both against their type.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that Ben Affleck owes his career to Kevin Smith casting him against type. I'm just saying that Ben Affleck owes his career to Kevin Smith for casting him against type. You know what I'm saying? So that's fine.
Yeah, it's such it's weird when you see these movies. Especially at my age, and you know all these people from like really big films, and they're like, and they like just like
they all have to start somewhere, right?
You go through their credits. I'm like, this is Matthew McConaughey's first movie. This is Ben Affleck's second movie. And all these other people, it's like so early in their career. Like if you cast this movie now, like the budget just went to like $80 million on salary.
Right. Yeah, just in salary as well.
School Ties was before this, and that had Affleck in it.
Yeah, this is his like second thing. He did like a lot of TV stuff, and then did School Ties, and he did this.
I think he was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah,
briefly. Yeah, he's like basketball number 5 or something.
And now look where he is today, all because of Dazed and Confused.
It truly is.
It truly is amazing.
For as independent of this movie kind of gets its name for. I was pretty impressed with cinematography. I thought there was some really, like, it was pretty standard, but what really was interesting to me is when he put the camera in the pool hall, when he was on, like, the foosball table or the pinball machine, he's, like, really uptight on all that stuff. That was interesting looking things that wasn't, like, typical for the rest of the film that I thought was done really well. Besides that, not too much really non-standard type cinematography coming through this.
I have a kind of a theory about that.
All right.
We were talking about Kevin Smith, and we're talking about Richard Linklater, and you're talking about, any of these other younger directors at this time, and this is their first or second film. And I don't know if this is the case with all young directors, but it seems like I need to tell a story, so I'm going to have a lot of dialogue and a lot of emotion and a lot of things that are going to come out, and the cinematography is second to the dialogue, and which it probably should be because you're telling the story, and then you have to use your tool to, to craft that story to bring it to life in an interesting way. But in this case, I think I have a lot of things to say. Basic cinematography is going to be just fine.
Oh yeah, I mean that's like Kevin Smith's standard until you get to like Red State, essentially, right?
Yeah.
But where they are just, they're saying 20 words a minute and just firing off all this dialogue, and there's like no breaths between characters. They're all just spitting lines constantly, which is how we all talk in the world and everything. So it is an interesting thing to look at because, but then it's interesting when they make that transition, because now I'm really interested to watch Boyhood to see what he, especially because that movie took so long to make, and see what he did and how he's kind of changed. Because that's not what we're watching next time.
No, next time we're watching his most recent film. Everybody Wants Some.
Okay.
Which you're going to look at this and you're going to see a lot of parallels between the two movies, but it's quite different.
Okay.
They're really two different films, but kind of the same vibe.
Okay. And back to production, I will say, I think there's not always a huge difference in cinematography when you're looking at like an indie movie or like a medium budget movie. Like cinematography generally pretty same. I think what really comes down to a lot of indie stuff is audio and essential and really like a ADR at the end when you're throwing in extra dialogue that was recorded. Because there's a lot of that in this, and it's very obvious when they do it because like, well, that sounds like not anywhere near what we're generally listening in this film. And so I think production wise, I mean, that's the only thing that, and I think some of that and what we watched the last 2 weeks with Steve Holland's films kind of suffer from that as well.
A lot of that. Yeah.
It's so interesting in how much better that's got technology wise because you can look at the credits and everyone's still doing added dialogue at the end and it sounds so much better now than what they were capable of back then.
Yeah, well, and also too it's a matter of the budget.
Oh yeah, and again, the budget's a huge thing.
Super low budget.
So
do you enjoy it? This isn't the first time you've seen this movie, right?
No, it is.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, first time. I did enjoy it. It was just not the film I was expecting going in, and I was really okay with that this time. My expectations weren't super high like when we watched last week's film, and I was let down a lot. This just hit like a groove, and I really dug it. It wasn't like over the top comedy. It wasn't like absurdist comedy. It was just this kind of depressing real life type of humor that kind of is day-to-day living with a lot of introspection thrown in. Cue junior high boys and confused seniors on what they're going to do with their lives.
390 horsepower.
So how many times have you actually watched it, Steven?
I don't know, 5 or 6 times. Probably like every 3 years or so I'll watch it. So if it came out in 93, that'd be 93, 96. I didn't see it in 93, so 96, 99, 202. Yeah, so probably about half a dozen times.
Did you like watch it in theaters when it came out?
No,
you caught it later?
No, I caught it later.
Yeah.
Because, when you're 22 in Hays, Kansas, this is not a movie that comes to Hays, Kansas.
No.
They will run Planet of the Apes, the horrible remake that they did with Marky Mark. They'll run that for 3 months solid. At a time when you only have 2 theaters in town and 2 screens in town, they will run that for 3 months solid. No, Dazed and Confused did not come here.
People wanted to see that.
So I didn't see it until it came out on DVD, so that'd probably be like 95, 96, somewhere around there, maybe 97-ish.
Is that kind of your story of watching this too, Matthew?
I think Otter and I saw it on VHS.
Yeah, VHS probably, yeah.
Not long after it came out, because I want to say that we saw it either like nearly immediately after or like right after we lived together, which would have been 1993, 1994, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah, again, it was one of those movies that sometimes you get something and you're like, okay, I'm fine with this. This is exactly a movie. This is that happened, and now it's done. I think I've sat down and watched it all the way through exactly twice. I saw it once on VHS, and I saw it once for the show. I'll stop if it pops up on like cable.
Yeah, it pops up on cable a lot. I think it ran on Comedy Central a lot.
Yeah, either Comedy Central or TBS had it for a while, just all the time. But it's not necessarily a film that I think I would ever seek out. I don't think I'm ever going to say to myself, you know what I really need to do? I need to go watch Dazed and Confused.
I think if you took out 15 minutes, this would be a much more solid story. I don't know what 15 minutes to take out, but I think you could drop a couple of characters and trim this by 15 minutes and get a good solid 90-minute feature, and it would be much better. But if you watch it on television, it's it's 102 minutes that's stretched out for 120 minutes.
Yeah.
So the story is like broken up by commercials all the time. And so it kind of loses something if you're watching it in broadcast. But if you sit down to blow through it on Netflix or something, it's not bad. It doesn't drag out too long.
No, I
think you're right. So. I think if they cut it just a bit, I mean, if you were just, and again, I don't even think there's anything necessarily that I would point out as this is dragging the whole mess down. I just feel like there's a more concise, more not necessarily linear, but more structurally sound movie to be had in these pieces. And maybe that's not what Linklater wanted, and maybe, he wanted to make sure that this was something that felt episodic, and it felt, kind of like, hey, here's a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of stories, and
well, he does.
I loved American Graffiti, and this is what I want.
He does say that this is like his greatest hits of things he remembers from high school.
Oh,
right.
Really?
And
yeah,
it makes sense.
That's legit. I mean, that's a thing that people do. We do that all the time here.
I can't remember things that we did in high school.
So what's next week's film called, Steven?
Next week's film is Dazed and Confused, and instead of incoming freshmen into high school, we're looking at incoming freshmen into college and the baseball team that he's doing at a Texas college in the 1980s. Like literally 10 years later.
What's it called?
Everybody Wants Some.
Okay, Everybody Wants Some.
Everybody Wants Some. What did I say?
Dazed and Confused.
Dazed and Confused. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Everybody Wants Some. Sorry, I'm a little sick.
Everybody wants to be Dazed and Confused.
Yeah, Everybody
Wants Some. And that just came out this year, right?
Yeah, yes, earlier this year.
Okay.
Yeah, 2006. I believe it came out in, I want to say, April in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
Okay.
I haven't seen that.
Did it like do anything well, or did it like just go digital, or did it?
No. It had a $10 million budget.
Yeah.
Only made $4.6 million in the box office.
Great.
Was like in and out in like 2 weekends, and then it was like off to home video or whatever, which is odd because I think it is there's something about this film, but again, I don't want to spoil this, but
sure.
When you watch Everybody Wants Some and compare it to Dazed and Confused, it's kind of like the same film.
One of those issues.
But we'll look and see how a director improves next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to
continue
watching our Linklater spree.
Mm-hmm.
So that's next week on the show. In the meantime, you can head over to majorspoilers.com where you can find podcasts like this, but so many more. You can find Critical Hit, the Major Spoilers podcast, and Top 5, because everyone loves a list of podcasts you can listen to. While you're there over at Major Spoilers, you can click on the Amazon.com link where you could probably buy Dazed and Confused on Blu-ray. You could probably buy Everybody Wants Some and watch it in advance.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, a little bit of money will come back to Major Spoilers, but it's not going to cost you any extra because that money will come back to us to help keep podcasts like this one on the air. But there's another way you can support Major Spoilers, and that's through the Patreon.
That's right, patreon.com/major spoilers. If you found some value or entertainment, or you just love movies and you want to see this show continue, you can support us, and I would really appreciate your support by signing up at patreon.com/major spoilers. The more you give, the more you get. Patreon.com/major spoilers.
And we'll see you next week on Zach on Film.
This podcast is copyright 2016 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.